All right, we've got about a minute after the hour. We'll give it just another 30 seconds for folks to join. Before we start the program, just want to remind you that we will have some interactive discussion at the end of the presentation. We'll have the discussion driven between Buck and David. And then once we get to the end of that, we'll get into some Q&A. You should see in your Zoom panel, there is a Q&A option there. So if you want to go ahead and start posing questions there as we go through the program, or if you want to wait till the end, happy to have you share your questions with us, which we will address as we get towards the end of the program. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and get rolling. And really excited to have everybody here. So getting started here on the how top sales teams are using automation to win in 2021. We are joined by Buck Wise, CMO of Cardone Ventures. Welcome, Buck.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This has been a long process, and I'm excited that I finally got the chance to talk to you guys and share a little bit of knowledge and learn a little bit from you as well. So thanks for having me on.
Great, Buck. It's great to have you. Thank you for joining. And David Gable, head of sales at Kixie. David.
Hey, thanks, Matt, for helping set this up. Thank you, Buck, I know you are slammed this year, just crushing it over there at Cardone. So I appreciate you making the time to jump on with us.
Of course, it has been a good year. For us, when COVID hit, obviously there are lots of business owners that were exposed, that had poor operations and didn't have the right automations and relationships in place. And so for us, we've never been busier. We've actually grown. We went from 15 employees pre-COVID to over 40 employees now, reaching into the first quarter. We're just hitting 40. We'll probably be at around 70 or 80 employees by the end of this year, according to our trajectory and our goal path. So it's been great. And we've appreciated, obviously, the partnership with Kixie and all that you guys have done for what we're building and all of the connections to our consumers and the different business owners and verticals across the country.
That's so cool. And it's one of the things I've always been impressed with you guys is that you're so liberal with sharing your knowledge. You don't put up like lots of paywalls and stuff to help people. So like, that was kind of one of my main goals with this whole thing, was to like be able to kind of wrangle you in for just a couple of minutes to share some of your wisdom of how you've made what for so many people has been a really difficult year into like a year of record growth for you guys. So anyway, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, David.
Well, that's great. Hey, David, well, how about you kick things off here? We'll start with topic number one. And if you want to drive the discussion here with Buck, I know I'm joined by lots of others here that are really interested to hear what you both have to share. So let's kick it off.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to start today talking about a tool that everyone already has. I mean, obviously, you guys know I work for Kixie, so I'm not even going to start going into my whole Kixie spiel, but like I wanted to focus on everyone's CRM, which is, I think for most salespeople, there's a real love-hate relationship between the CRM, and it probably skews more towards the hate side, right? I think for like Buck and I, people in like at the top of organizations, we love CRMs, right? We get a whole bunch of data about what our salespeople are doing. We get accountability. We can track and project sales across like months, quarters, whatever. For the average salesperson, I think they typically think of a CRM as like more work, right? This is something they have to do. They have to put information in just to kind of like basically shoot information up to people like Buck and I to hold them accountable, and also maybe serve as like an after the fact repository for what happened during their sales calls, but it isn't really something that they think helps them day to day with their sales, at least no more than like a notebook would, with just like notes about what their prospects are doing or what they've had in previous conversations with them. So I think I really wanted to start there today by kind of changing your perception of what a CRM is. So I think a lot of people are lucky and they maybe have like a real sales engagement suite, like an outreach or a sales opt, and they think of that kind of sales engagement platform as like, oh, something that helps my sales team, right? But they don't think of that as their CRM is the same sort of thing. And actually, I think I would make the case that in fact, your CRM is potentially more powerful than those sales engagement platforms. And here's the reason why. So I think most people's sales process tends to be pretty prescriptive, meaning I'm going to load some contacts into maybe my sales engagement tool, or maybe just into my list of people I need to reach out to. And I'm going to go and I'm going to call them on day one. And then I'm going to email them on day two. And then I'm going to call them again on Thursday at 12 p.m. and hope they pick up then. And if they don't, I call them on day 14 and that kind of thing, right? They've got like a scheduled prescriptive call flow. And really the gaps in between are just kind of meant to like make it seem like you're not bugging the person too much. It's not like there's like a necessary strategy as to why you're calling somebody on day 14 at noon. That's just what's in the script, right? But meanwhile, your CRM has all this information coming into it, right? Like, for instance, whether people visited your website, depending on whether you have that tied with your CRM. If they've opened emails because you have email tracking. If they've responded to text messages, if you have an integrated texting platform. If they've called you back and you've missed their calls. Like, you have all this data coming in. And I think what I'd like to encourage people to do, and what they can do with a tool like obviously Kixie or any other like integrated platform that works with the automations inside that CRM, is to make an outreach cadence that's less prescriptive and more reactive. So for instance, the minute they send that text message, I'm calling them that minute, either automatically or at least via prompt. The minute they open that email, I'm shooting them a text message to see if they have other questions about that email. The minute they engage with a post online, or the minute they open an attachment to an email, I'm auto dialing them that minute. And by doing that, what you've done is you've turned this kind of after the fact note-taking machine that you've been treating your CRM like for so long, and you've turned it into a sales engagement platform. You turned it into something that actually helps increase your sales across your sales team. And I think that's one of the big shifts I think I'd like to urge people to make this year.
Awesome. Awesome, David. I'd like to get some context and contrast. I see Elena, Gary, Jackie, Jen, Jeremy, Ralph, Sherman. I know Sherman. Bill, I know Ben Beard, Abby. I'd love to get some context and contrast from you guys. Who has a CRM? Yes, put yes. And who doesn't have a CRM? Let's get a little bit of a temperature check. Yes, Sherman, I know you're in HubSpot. You work closely with us. Sherman is a great client of ours. He works globally across the world. I believe, Sherman, are you not in Asia now as we speak? Or are you stateside on the East Coast? I never know where you're in Boston now. That's right. So CRMs are interesting because they hold the power of data. And so my career was built backwards. For any of you I don't know, Abby, I don't think we've ever met, or Dan, or Elena, Gary, Jackie, Wright, Jen, Jeremy, Ralph. I think I do know Ralph, maybe. Let me give you just quick context to my background, if it's helpful. So let's see, Matt says we are seeing no CRM. So we are seeing no CRM, Zoho CRM. Zoho, it's a very affordable, not a very pretty UI, but it's a very affordable CRM.
It is, yeah, you're right. It's only marginally easier to set up than Salesforce, and it's not that pretty. Yeah.
Right. What is totally the best CRM in the world? Who knows the answer to this? I know that Sherman knows because he hears me say this all the time. The best CRM in the world is, somebody say it. The one you use, Sherman, you know that. The one you use.
Ends in spot. I'll give you like a clue.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it's whichever one you actually implement a process for. I don't care if it's Zoho. I don't care if it's Salesforce or HubSpot. But if you're not using it, and if you're not holding everyone on your team accountable for it, then it's never going to be effective for you. So the key is, don't get caught up in the strategy of what you're using, but in the process of how you're using it. That's going to be the key. But my background is very backwards. I started in the creative space. I started in television and radio, and I learned to build communities. I learned creativity, content creation. I understood all the elements that it took to drive impact and speaking directly to people, to motivate them, to inspire them, to get them engaged, to then build what? Relationships. Right? That's what marketing is. We're building relationships. You have to trust me, and I have to engage you. And so that's the beginning of my career. But that alone is usually what most people think is marketing, that content creation piece. Everyone thinks of marketing as that shiny object. It's that Facebook ad. It's that beautiful video that you're going to create. You're so excited as a business owner about that call to action you created. People are going to love this catchphrase. It's so snappy. That's marketing. Well, the truth is it's tactical. And what we call that is advertising. That's not marketing at all. That's advertising. And so my next phase of my career was building my own agency. I noticed there was a disconnect between traditional and digital. MySpace, the Facebook, you had to have a college email address to join. We remember these times, right? David, you look younger than me. Maybe you don't remember those times.
I vaguely remember them. I was like coming to
Yeah.
fruition with it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was right in the thick of it, man. And when that happened, traditional television and radio, they sort of fought digital. They were like, don't leave our platform. This is where all the revenue's coming in. If you leave our eyes and ears, right? That's what media is, eyes and ears. You're listening to us, you're watching us, you see us. If you leave us and you go over to these digital platforms, we're going to lose revenue. When in turn, if you think about, like, let's take radio for an example. Like, how did you communicate with listeners in radio? Telephones. Right? It was just a platform. It was an analog platform where people called and communicated with you, yet you were on an FM frequency modulated signal, translating them from another platform. You were using a platform on another platform. So I was one of the first people in radio. This is why CBS hired me as head of digital for their CHR formats. I was running all of the digital strategy and ecosystem because I learned a way to set appointments, build relationships, and drive them across platforms, traditional, digital, traditional, digital, traditional, digital. So it was in that I started to build my own agency, working with big brands like Major League Baseball. I had a team of 6 or 7. I mean, it wasn't a huge agency, but it was definitely for me a learning lesson. And this is good context for anyone that doesn't know me. This is good context here. I understand the pain points and break points of building a business. I understand what it's like to be up at midnight and not really sure why you're doing the taxes the way you're doing them and hoping that you do them the right way. I understand what it's like to not be able to find the right talent. And I understand what it's like to not know how to fire the person appropriately so that you have limited liability when you do it. I understand all of those different break points as you build the business. But I ultimately knew that in that agency that I built, strategy was the key. Content was the end game and strategy was the front end. And so it was in that agency I learned strategy. And so there was another lesson that I hadn't quite learned yet. And that's where David's talking, where he's already in the CRM. He's talking about the data that you provide. I knew strategy, I knew creative. What I didn't have was an understanding of data and its importance, and how to use the data to inform the strategy, to build the creative, to execute the advertising campaigns. And so I left my agency. I sold it to my partner. I knew that law of the lid, if you know John Maxwell, he talks about your ability to grow based on the people that you surround yourself with. I knew there was something bigger than working with the Detroit Tigers, North American International Auto Show. I was working with Valvoline Oil Midwest. I just knew there was more to learn and more to understand. And so I took a job as a social strategist for Nike. And I did this on the agency side, quickly moving my way up to managing the digital strategy for Nike, running Nike Golf. Worked on projects across Starbucks for 3 years, pumpkin spice latte, frappuccino. In the CPG space, working with Nestle. In the fintech space, working with PayPal. I got a big exposure to big brands, big business, big billion-dollar budgets. And what that really, truly taught me in the last 10 to 11 years of that career, working for, by the way, the world's largest agency. We had 41,000 employees. So this is massive, massive enterprise infrastructure. What it really taught me was data, the importance of data. Strategy alone is strategy. Creative alone is creative. If you don't have data, you're literally throwing spaghetti on a fridge and seeing what sticks. It's called the shotgun strategy. And so that's the importance when we talk about CRMs. That's the importance of having a place to collect information about who you're talking to. For me, you can't build a relationship if you don't understand who you're building the relationship with. There's a famous quote called, "To know me is to love me." To know me is to love me. If you don't know your consumer, you can't possibly serve them. And at the end of the day, what provides the most value is not your product, but the service you're able to offer that consumer. And so when we talk about automation and CRM, it's all great. It's technology that you have to have. And the reason you have to have a partner like Kixie or a HubSpot CRM is because you can't scale your business, even with your authentic relationships. You can't scale that past 10 customers, 20 customers, 50 customers, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 customers. The only way, there's a balance between the technology and automation and the personalization and segmentation of who you're talking to, where you're talking to them, and how you talk to them. And so for me, that's the baseline. You've got to be collecting this information somewhere, and you've got to be using innovative tools like Kixie in order for you to take that level of business through your breakpoint and scale it to the next level.
Absolutely. You know, it was interesting. Buck and I were talking yesterday in preparation for this webinar, and he said something to me. And I don't know if you can use this quote later on, but I loved it. You know, if you don't build it, they won't come.
Yeah.
And you were talking about marketing, and it's so interesting. You know, I think a lot of us think about automation as a way to take the human element out of sales, right? I'm going to automate something. And that's actually the opposite of exactly what Buck is talking about, right? Like what we're actually doing with automation isn't getting rid of the human element. It's actually just getting that human element to be able to talk to each other. Like from those early days of being able to call into a radio show and connect with somebody, all we're trying to do is just connect with people, right? Like we're using a marketing strategy to draw people in, and we're collecting those people inside that CRM. And all we're using automation to do is make sure that you're not just calling them at like random times when they're not free to talk, like rather than actually sending out meaningful, impactful emails and calling them at the very time they're reviewing those emails and might have questions about them. Let's call then. Let's call that radio show when they're asking for people to call in, rather than just calling it at a random time when the host is talking and getting nowhere, right? Like that's what automation is about. So I'm so happy you brought that up.
100%. Hey, I'd like to know of the participants here, Jen and Jeremy, Harms, Ralph, don't make me go look you up on Instagram and stalk you. I want to know, how big is your business and what type of business are you in? Gary, Eleni, Dan, Bill, what type of business are you in and how big is that business? What's your annual revenue? What are your employees? I'm just curious. I want to know, who am I talking to? True to fashion, right? True to fashion. I've got a backup. Jeremy says just starting working on legal tech. Love it. You're at day one. Startup. Love that. You're in a great place. You know, if I'm really talking about knowing your consumer, what I just did is I'm asking you for data. I want that data back. I never give anything out without getting data back. So Ben did 14 million in sales last year with 8 employees. Of course, Ben, of course, I know you've just been crushing it. So
break that down for us. Like when you say like getting something back, what do you mean by that? Because I think that's really important. People should do that.
So marketing's a value trade. You give, they give, right? You can never, and you know, I know a few of you probably have, you know, followed along other marketers who have other analogies for how you do. It's like punch, punch, jab, jab, that whole thing, right? It's like, it's like that concept, right? But at the end of the day, whatever process or structure or strategy you're using, you know, think about this. It's more valuable to get somebody's cell phone number than their credit card information. It's more personal to get somebody's cell phone than their credit card. Because if you have your credit card, it's transactional. It's literally a transaction. But your ability to develop multiple transactions is all tingent on your ability to have that relationship. And when you are on Facebook or Instagram, right, you are bound by the algorithms of those platforms. You don't own those relationships. But a cell phone has no algorithm. It's direct one-to-one contact. So when you're using a platform like Kixie and you're texting them or you're getting calls and round robins into the sales, that is the creme de creme. That is the absolute most valuable piece of property you can take from any consumer, so that what it brings you is the opportunity to develop a better and quick, fast pace to market relationship. And so Ralph says 20 people, 2 million in fees. We're helping businesses that are struggling with too much debt. Love that, Ralph. That's fantastic.
And it's cool. You mentioned mobile phone numbers. I know I'm probably skipping. I think there was a slide in here, and Matt's going to kill me because I'm skipping ahead probably, about like connecting with people during this year when COVID is hit, right?
Yeah.
And you couldn't be more right about those mobile phone numbers, right? Because that's meeting people where they are. I'll tell you where they aren't. They're not in the office by their desk phone.
Right,
You know what I mean? They maybe
true.
are, they're not checking maybe their company email address. Maybe they are, maybe they're only sort of checking it, but I'll tell you where they are. They're by their cell phone at home.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly where they are.
Yeah.
That's no doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
More than ever, I think that's crucial this year. You know
and that's a good setup, David. We just turned to topic 2 here, how the pandemic has changed successful sales strategy. I know probably everybody here has some story that they can share around how the pandemic has affected their business, either from a growth perspective, Buck, like you were sharing, or maybe something that's negative. But love to hear you guys share your perspective and maybe even ask our audience what their perspective has been.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we immediately went to a virtual strategy. Mm-hmm. We kind of dabbled in a few digital webinars and things like that, but we immediately built out $1 million studios, multiple studios. And in those studios created a program. In fact, anyone here today can join for free. I'll put it here in, let's see, I'll put it in the chat for you. So it's easy to click. I don't know, does it work? Will the chat work on replay if I put it in the chat?
They'll see it. I don't know if they can click it, but yeah.
Okay, so click
CardoneVentures.com.
That's it, CardoneVentures.com. The very first thing you're going to find when you go to CardoneVentures.com is name, number, email, and phone, right? And what we are doing is every Tuesday, we do a 1-hour Zoom, much like what you're watching right now, with our CEO, Brandon Dawson. And he is a merger scaling acquisition expert. So every hour, he spends time with hundreds, if not thousands of business owners, depending on the Tuesday. We've been up into the thousands of business owners that join us every single Tuesday. It's called Owners Live. You get to engage and interact and ask questions about the pain points that you're having inside your business. And so we set that up as sort of a value add. Again, what are we adding in value in order to receive that name, phone number, and email? You know, if you're a business over $1 million in annual revenue and you are looking to get through those breakpoints and scale to 10 million, 20 million, Brandon, our CEO, has done this. His last company, no equity, no outside investment, no investors whatsoever, no capital. He built his last business from scratch and sold it for 77 times EBITDA, $151 million. Wow. That's how much he sold it for. So he understands when you're at 1 million, the breakpoints, 5 million, the breakpoints, 20 million, the breakpoints, 80 million, the breakpoints. He understands as your business grows, all of those different breakpoints. I understand it from my 25 years of marketing experience. I understand it not building my own $151 million business, but working on Fortune 500 businesses like Nike, Starbucks, and Nestle, Google, PayPal. So I understand, as your tech stack grows, all of the things that you're going to need to be integrating. I understand, as you scale and grow your teams, who you need in senior leadership from a creative standpoint, from a strategy or data standpoint. So we work with businesses to do that every single Tuesday. And that has turned out to be one of the greatest platforms for us to develop new relationships. It's where we meet people like Ralph, who's helping businesses struggle with their debt. It's, it's like, Ralph, follow me on Instagram @AboutBuck. I'd love to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing in that credit space, in the debt space. It's these are the platforms where we've been able to connect and develop relationships. And so, I would almost argue that it's working smarter post-COVID for us than harder. Because before we were flying around and doing events with hundreds of people in big hotel rooms, and you're not really meeting everyone in the room, and you're not really able to develop close one-on-one relationships. But digital has given us the ability to do that continually. The next phase of that is Clubhouse. The Grant Cardone, who obviously is part of our network, he's our partner. He's driving millions of dollars in real estate investment off of Clubhouse. And so COVID has just offered new platforms. Nothing ever changes in marketing. Nothing ever changed. It's all the same. It's just the platform changes. Radio died. No, it didn't. It just turned into Clubhouse. It turned into long form. It turned into YouTube. It's the same people. It's your ability to adapt and understand how to leverage that platform to make it more successful. People don't go to radio because they didn't innovate. You can't discover new music because you can't control it, right? There's now you can go to YouTube or Spotify and you can get the new music that you want to listen to immediately without having to wait for someone to tell you when it's appropriate for you to listen to it. So the platform didn't innovate, right? Which is why people drove away from it. So I would say post-COVID, digital has just played a more important role in most businesses' strategies. And what it really did is just revealed the people who've never invested time, money, or energy into digital, and they're just behind the 8 ball.
Totally. And you know, that consultative approach of like really delivering value in terms of just information to the people you're working with, absent even requesting anything from them, I think is so powerful. You know, I've had the pleasure of working with Sherman, who's on this call, who's like a beast at scaling. And when I hear him talking, I'm like, oh man, like you guys clearly, he worked with you guys and has some awesome knowledge about exactly how to scale through repeatable processes. I know when I've talked to him, it's so funny. I've like secondhand attended your guys' seminars through him.
Nice.
It's great.
Nice. I love that.
He's awesome. And it's, you know, it's about like figuring out what's working and then doubling down on that. And then trying to figure out like, okay, like what are my top performers doing that I can mimic, that I can help teach other people how to do, both internally to my existing sales team so they level up and so I can scale that team, but also externally. Like maybe I've learned something inherently as a company that people wouldn't even think of as being like my primary offering. I know someone who's involved in legal services, and as I want to say like a recovering attorney, as someone who was in-house counsel before I took this job. What's so cool is you're learning sales, right? And you're learning marketing. The two fields you probably did not think of yourself as, you know, delving into initially, but now those same attorneys who maybe you actually want to talk to about legal services, instead, you could actually draw them in by talking to them about marketing and sales, right? Two new skills that you've learned through Buck or Cardone or just through your own experience. Now you've become kind of a secondhand expert in just by pure fact of growing your business. So yeah, that's so cool.
It's so true. When I was a creative marketer, when I first started and I was in front of the camera on the microphone, I never really viewed marketing as sales. I think that's one of the biggest misses in any organization, is that marketing is sales and sales is marketing. Just like you've heard the term, everyone in the organization is a salesperson. Everyone in your organization is also a marketer. They also represent and are ambassadors of your brand. And whether it's through flow, conversion, or the retention of your cycle, every employee in your business plays an important part in the relationships that are developed across that organization or in your community and how you're outreaching and presenting yourself. And so it's such an important part to realize the responsibility you have as a marketer and all of the tools, skills, and trades that you learn from a sales standpoint. You know, once you learn sales, there's nothing you can't do. There's nowhere you can't go. Sales is literally the ability to transform the decisions of the people that you're speaking to move in the direction to hit the goals that you're trying to hit. And when you realize that it's the golden key to unlock anything, it's life-changing.
Yeah, and Buck, that's an awesome segue as we set up the next topic that we wanted to cover, which is automating your sales engagement. And David, I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but that challenge of, okay, everyone's a seller, everyone's a marketer. How do we start to build in that automation to drive that engagement with your sales team? David, do you want to start on this?
Yeah, totally. I think I'll start by actually looking back. So, you know, Buck talking about radio and calling in made me think of another interesting technological transformation that's always kind of felt weird to me. And that was namely that we started with calling and went to texting. I guess whenever I think about that, like in my mind, you would think the progression of technology would be the other direction, right? You would think we would go from like texting small bits of data in a new direction to like talking on the phone where it's bi-directional. There's so much.
That's funny, David. I've never thought of that. You know, you're right. You would think we'd be doing like the T9. We figured out how to Morse code. And like we really did go voice first with the 1/4-inch plug and play. Hello,
it's so weird.
Yeah.
But the only thing I can think of is that texting's asynchronous, right? So I text you at a time that's convenient for me, and you respond at a time that's convenient for you. And telephone's the exact opposite. I call you at a time that's convenient for me,
right?
And then you have to like maybe acquiesce to an unknown amount of time to talk to me about something
you're
you
absolutely
don't know,
right.
You know?
It's inconvenient for every party for the voice side.
Totally inconvenient. Yeah. So I think largely what I've tried to do with automation on the Kixie side, and what you guys have done too, is I think try and make that communication more synchronous. So again, rather than like texting you or calling you at times that are just completely random and like are fit within my schedule. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all that data coming in and all that marketing collateral and all that email tracking. And I'm going to call you at times when you're visiting my website, when you've just attended my webinar, when you've texted me back a response asking a question about an email you've opened, when you've opened that email for the first or maybe second or third time. And so I know you've got questions about that damn thing.
No doubt.
That's when I'm going to call or text you, right? And so for me, automation is all about that. It's about trying to make calling and texting more and emailing more synchronous, right? And make it fit both of our schedules.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I got an Uber Eats order. It just came in.
I love it, dude. Yeah.
Very digital. Very digital.
Yeah.
My food's all delivered. Very digital. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. It's it's easier to track data through text as well. You can't really track data through voice. It's hard to get context. Texting obviously has been a key driver in building relationships for us. I'm texting clients right now using the Kixie system. They were supposed to come by for an in-office tour. We're going to get 9 to 11 inches of snow in Portland, Oregon. So they are canceling on me through Kixie, and I'm going to write back to them and say, not a problem. We are going to meet up next week. But I'm able to have that fast dialogue. And to your point, it's in synchronous. So it's when I'm able to get back and when they're able to get back. It makes it easier to develop real, true relationships.
Totally.
That's great. Any other thoughts on sales engagement, and we can jump to the next topic?
Let's go.
There are, but I know I want to be conscious of time because I know I'm like.
Yeah. Let's keep going. We're about 34 minutes in, and I know people probably really love to hear your thoughts, Buck, around what you've seen sales teams driving success. What are they doing that's working for them in 2021? What have they learned from last year? Love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I've gone through this, I think, 3 times in the last 24 hours. I'm on coaching calls with a lot of our big businesses. They pay a fair amount of money. I think I'm, what is it now? It's $50,000 for a coaching session with me over 6 months. And we have a lot of big businesses that just want proximity to me. And so yesterday I drew this diagram that you can see here. I'll try to re-explain it to you. When you're using, I almost used a permanent Sharpie on a whiteboard. That would have been bad. When you're using automation, you've got to understand see if you can still hear me here. You've got to understand where you're at in the user cycle. So from a sales standpoint, I think the first thing we all did was like, hey, cool. We figured out how to automate this text. They came in here, we text them here, we do this here, we do this thing. And it was very transactional and it was very linear, if that makes sense. There wasn't a lot of depth or breadth to how we automated. But now with so many filters and properties and tools, you're able to segment audiences based on where they're at in the relationship. So if you look at this bar here, this is like 6 months, right? Let's call that a 6-month timeline. And in that 6-month timeline, where are they at? You want to get them from here. I have no idea who you are, what you do, and why it would benefit my life, to absolutely understand, see the value, more importantly, trust you. And so I'm converting whatever that product or sales is, right? So there's a lot of variables inside that 6-month window. You kind of know who we are, but you don't know, you kind of know who we are, but you don't know our product or service. That's different from somebody who knows, let's say, who Grant Cardone is, but they don't know who Cardone Ventures is. And they need to learn about our CEO, Brandon Dawson, and the fact that he's scaled hundreds of businesses and created millions and millions of net worth for himself and other business owners across the world. So then they know who Brandon is and they know who Grant is, and they don't know what our product or service is. So it's my job to segment that audience of and some people would call this cold, warm, hot. Like that's how you would segment your what we would call your pipeline or your staging. They call it staging sometimes. So it's in the understanding of this data, context and contrast. How are you using automation to understand where in the relationship the cycle is? Because what we ultimately want to do is drive business faster impact, right? So I need to know what you don't know in order to build more rapport and relationships with you to get you to the next phase, to get you here. right? To get you here, to get you here. And ultimately, I want to take that 6-month window and I want to make it 30 days. I want to figure out how can I get the 6-month window to 30 days? The only way I know how to do that is through data, through understanding who the consumer is. So we use tools like Kixie in order to qualify those conversations. We use automated questionnaire tools. We ask questions that go out and as they answer them, they feed back into the CRM. Then we're able to segment them as, we haven't hit $1 million in annual revenue. It's a big qualifier for us. We don't typically work with businesses that are under $1 million in annual revenue because they haven't hit their own belief system to know that they can do what they need to do. A lot of times while we're a business management company, we also tend to be therapists. We work with people who don't have, they've got restrictions in their own mental ability to create success and wealth in their personal, professional, and financial life. And so it's understanding where somebody's at in that process it has been one of the biggest game changers for us. And the more we do that, the easier it is for us to create relationships and convert.
Totally. And what's interesting is I think, when people come and work with you guys, one of the first things you do is make sure they adopt a CRM, typically like a HubSpot, good CRM like HubSpot. And what that does is for any size business, it lets them start figuring out what that is. Because I think a lot of companies, to your point, especially if they're smaller, they don't even necessarily know what that pipeline actually looks like, what the phases are, like where the inflection points are, where a deal either goes sour or goes forward, depending on an answer to a certain question or around their belief in whether or not that product can actually deliver the results they're looking for. And so I think I would urge anybody, and this is like, you don't even need Kixie for this or anything. Like the first step, I think, for a successful business, especially right now, is to take the time to map that out. Like, what is your average customer or your sales cycle? What does that process look like from the time they first hear about Cardone to the time they're actually like, you know what? I believe in myself. I've scaled my business enough. I want to get that extra help to really push myself to the next level. Right. What are those phases in between? You know what I mean? So that you can intercede in there. And so you can be like, oh, this is where he's going to start losing faith in whether or not scaling is a good idea. And he's going to start worrying about actually trimming down on spend this year because of uncertainty. So I want to get in there and I want to take the time to like make sure I be therapist a little bit and reassure them that like actually if you have a good business model, now is the time to try and spend and to try and really scale where other people are pulling back,
Right. 100%. Absolutely agree.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, I'd love to turn it to maybe some more direct Q&A with the audience. I'd love to open it up to everyone. You guys have been very generous with your time and your knowledge here, and love hearing what you're both sharing, Buck and David. But for the audience, I know some of you have probably listened to Buck and heard some of his thoughts and ideas. Maybe it's the first time for David, but love to engage you guys directly. Any direct questions you have for Buck or David here, love to engage in that part, and then we'll wrap it up for the webinar. But feel free to join in here on the Q&A panel or the chat panel, either one. Love to hear what your questions are.
I'm curious about response rates from SMS surveys that you run with customers. Response rates, that's from Sherman. Do you guys have stats on your response rates for SMS?
Yeah, it totally depends on basically what your prospects look like. So different industries have a varied response rate. So like internally, us, like for new Kixie trial signups, we get around like a 20% response rate, but I think that's largely because we get people's mobile phone numbers right away.
Sure.
For call forwarding. So like we have a little bit of a leg up in that kind of thing. For people doing just like broad SMS outreach as like an outbound strategy, it's definitely less. I will say something that increases it quite a bit is when you marry that strategy to a triggerable event. So something like if you've got their mobile phone number and now they've visited your website or they've entered your chat and engaged with your chatbot, now you're texting them, or they've opened an email you sent, or they've opened an attachment to an email, or they've played an embedded video, and at the end of that video, you're texting them. That kind of thing gets a much higher engagement. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say I ask this question a lot. How dirty is your data?
Yeah.
Totally. How dirty is your data? Because that rate is going to depend on, to your point, I mean, you said it a little more eloquently, David. You said how qualified is your lead, right?
Yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic about it, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Listen, if you're buying shit lists out there, you're gonna have a shit return rate.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And we like to test out. We have a proven method and strategy of building audiences and connecting and developing relationships. But every now and then we'll just, we'll take a Zoom info list, or we'll take a vertical specific list, and we'll try to pound it. And it's always dirty. You just can't buy customers. You just can't, you just can't buy them. There is no magic golden list of customers that you can just go buy out. So it really is about nurturing the right people and qualifying them, and then removing the unqualified from your database so that it increases. I know HubSpot uses a feature, at least on the email side, where anyone who hasn't opened an email in over 3 emails, you just remove them from your email database so that it cleans your percentages up a little bit,
Yep. Yeah, I think having those giant lists of potential prospects in the beginning is such a fleeting sense of confidence. Like, you like it initially because like, oh, I have so many leads, 50,000 leads who are all using X, Y, and Z technology stack.
Yep.
But it's fluff. It's not something real. It's not like a real foundation. So like,
well, not to mention, they didn't purposefully ask to connect with you. So when you're looking at this, you're like way out, and you're not even cold. You're frigid. Because they're like, I didn't sign up for this. I don't even know you. I don't want anything to do with you. So it's just the list thing is a bad idea. It really, your own the first thing is, do you know your percentage? Sherman, great question. Do you know your percentage? I know my percentage. I'm pretty sure that David knows his percentage. We know our percentage. The question is, I always go back to strategic tools. The questions for most, Sherman knows because he's been in our network for so long, but most business owners that are looking for help and they're stuck and they can't get past whatever that annual revenue point is, they're always asking us, they're just like, how do I do better Facebook ads? And I'm like, wrong question. Do you know your data so that you can have better informed decisions, so that you can make better strategies, so that you can create better creative? And so I always bring them all the way back, come all the way back. Yep. How are you collecting the data, and how is it informing the decisions that you're making? So strategic tools, get those straight. But there is, maybe this for texting, David, there are average rates that you can expect in conversions. But again, I use the word average because it's across multiple verticals, different sizes of businesses. It's like, I think an email campaign, if you hit over 30% open, it's considered amazing.
That's great.
Yeah. It's like, that's an average number.
Totally. That's amazing. Yeah.
If you convert out of the 30%, you can convert in the top 10%. You're like crushing it.
Yep.
If you converted a product 10% out of a 30% open rate, that's like when you don't have data. That's, I always use the national average. Yeah. When you don't have data, you got to bank against something. Just bank against a basic, again, you're only as good as your data. So if you're banking against national data, it's like, okay, well, this is a place to start, but then let's look at your 30-day, 90-day, 60-day, 90-day rolling average. Now let's benchmark against our own success and let's start to tighten it up.
Totally.
Hey, David, I think related to this, David, we had a question from Jeremy about for one-on-one personalized SMS sent out via Kixie. Can you get insight into how fast those messages are viewed?
You can get insight into how quickly they're sent out and delivered. We even have deliverability statistics. In terms of response statistics, we will, but actually, that's going to show up. I'd love to take credit for it. It's actually going to be inside your CRM. So because we pipe all of that data directly to HubSpot or the other CRMs you're using, Pipedrive, Zoho, Salesforce, I'll drop them in here too. Like, what we do is we pipe that right back to them. So we create workflow automations all the time for people to do exactly that, and then have triggers based off of that. So let's take it a step further. Let's not only know when people respond to those text messages and receive them, let's also follow those up with some automation. So the minute they respond to that text message, let's call them, or let's shoot them an email with more information, or let's direct them to my Calendly to set up a time to talk to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
exactly.
And what's interesting, Buck mentioned a second ago about, you know, you get people come to him all the time, I'm sure, like, hey, how do I make my Facebook ads better?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you're right, they're asking the wrong question. And I think if they're like, if you're brand new and you're trying to figure out like, well, okay, what question should I be answering? What should my marketing even look like? First thing I do, take a look at some of the existing customers you have, because chances are like the customers you have, they're not anomalies. It's not like they represent no other niche of customers and it's just this one solitary person who loved you for this one reason and no one else will. No, chances are they're actually a representative. They're actually an emissary of some other group that's largely not met you yet, but that whole group would love to hear what you have to say and would like your product. So like, work backwards from that, you know?
Yeah. Hey, Buck, I think we've got this. This may be a good question for you to start with. Ralph is asking, my issue is that when I run digital, they are very hard to get on the phone. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I'd have to ask some more qualifying questions, but you know, essentially you're trying to get them to take a step from a digital interaction to a physical relationship through voice, through calling, through communication. You know, again, it's a trade. Everything in marketing is trade. So my without having a lot of context to the question, my first assumption is the value is not there. Whatever it is in that communication to them in a digital way, it was enough to get them to click, right? If we're looking at KPIs, the click, the download, the share, the whatever that was, there was enough value to track that KPI. But there's not enough value to do this, to take the time to do this. And so we need to understand, A/B test different ideas, solutions. What are the pain points of the client? What are the pain points of the customer? What problems are you solving for them? And how much do they trust that you're the person to solve it for them so that they're willing to go, yeah, you know what, I'll give you 15 minutes. I'll hit the Calendly link and I'll sign up to do that because I do believe you're the person who's going to solve this for me. Or I want the faith that you're going to be the person to do it for me. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to share that with me. So that's the first place I'd look, is what is that? Understanding your brand is going to be key to delivering that message clearly. So when we go take a step back to your strategic tools, you know, the answer always lies in the strategic tools, by the way. When we go through owned, paid, or earned platforms, you know, going from digital, going to calls, going to text, we always go back to strategic tools, your brand house. What's the purpose and why you do business? Not what you do, but why you do it. What's your core differentiator? What are the attributes that describe the feeling of your business? How are those things translated when we talk about creating campaigns creatively? How are they translated so that they connect with the core persona? Looking at the demographics of who we're talking to. We're looking at the qualitative and the quantitative of who we're talking to, really understanding who they are. You know, I went through a 6-month exercise with pumpkin spice latte where we had to determine who was the drinker of a pumpkin spice latte. And you'd be surprised to hear that Heather has a pair of UGG boots. She just graduated college. She only has one because she can't afford the second because of the college debt. She walks down the street just a few blocks because she's in a metro area, right, to meet her friend to buy that first sip of the pumpkin spice. When she wraps her fingerless gloves around the cups and she starts to take that sip, she realizes it's not the flavor of the drink, but the feeling she gets of the friendship that she shares with her college friends that are now in the workforce that really gets her excited for the pumpkin spice season. And Starbucks is the reason that she goes to get it. Like understanding the mentality of who she was and what drove her to make decisions was important on how we communicated to Heather and on what platforms we communicated to Heather. So I'm going, Ralph, I know that's a lot. I'm going way back to like, did we build the format, the platform correctly so that we don't feel like we're grabbing straws or smoking mirrors and we're just trying a shotgun strategy? Like having very hardcore evidence of who they are and what you stand for are going to help deliver better results at the end of the day. You know, and maybe you build that and you don't have it right, but at least you know what you had and where you need to evolve, pivot, or optimize to build it better. If that makes sense.
That's great.
And from a very practical first step, Ralph, like I would say, explain to them why you want to jump on a call. Like, again, you're asking to make that move from an asynchronous form of communication that's convenient for them and safe, and they're not going to get stuck talking to you, to a synchronous form of communication where they're kind of like potentially held hostage for a second. What is like really communicating like, hey, I'd love to jump on a call with you. And then why? Because honestly, like I would like to learn more about your business. Like, I think even absent you using Kixie or using whatever services I'm selling you, like, I have experience in this space. I'd love to help you just understand the space. And if you happen to think my product might be helpful, great. But if not, you've gotten value out of that call absent the sale, which I think is super important. Like, they need to be able to walk away. This is true for, I think, any sales team. If they get value out of the communication they have with you, especially the synchronous communication over the phone, absent the purchase, they will pick up your calls. That's the thing. Like, it might be 6 months later, they might be at a different business, they might be a completely different question. But if you've delivered value over synchronous communication in the past, they're going to pick up your calls. They're going to call you back, which is crazy for a salesperson, right? You're not just happen to catch them flat-footed and they answer. They actually will return your call, which is like a shocking, amazing thing. So I would definitely encourage that. And I think Buck's dead on, which is that the way to deliver the most value in those calls, so they do call you back, is to really understand them. If you can do that through the data you've got already, amazing. And if you can't, get on the phone with them and just find that out. No pressure, not trying to get you to buy anything. I just want to understand your business and where you're coming from.
Yep. I also, Ralph, I understand when I start throwing out all the strategic tools, understanding your data sets, your personas, your brand house. Like, most owners are like, I'm a practitioner, I'm an executor at what I do, and I'm amazing at it. I did not go to school for 25 years in marketing, and I don't know what any of that stuff is. So most owners are just like, great, that sounds awesome. You're real cool. Thanks for that, Bob. So let me, in the link here, Ralph, you're going to see cardoneventures.com/events. I host an event called a 10X 360. You'll notice there's dates all throughout the year. I teach business owners over 2 days how to build the foundation for their marketing efforts. I teach you how to create that strategic tool set. Now that's again, this program is a $30,000 2-day deep dive. And we go through all 4 quadrants of your business. We go through financial modeling. We go through operations and scaling. We go through market densities, competitive natures. We go through HR, how to hire, how to fire, how to inspire, because that's really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say or David says. If you can't inspire your people to grow and scale the business for you, we're just a bunch of hogwash. We're just all technical at the end of the day. If you can't build through people, and that's the biggest piece to what Cardone Ventures does, is we help business owners understand that people drive the business. And once you learn how to drive the business through people, it's in the technique that you use and the strategy that you use through finance, marketing, and HR. It's through that technique that you'll grow and scale and hit those breakpoints and continue to succeed.
That's great.
And so that's, if you want more info on that, you can always reach out to me. I go through Kixie, you can Kixie me, or you can go through Instagram. I go @aboutbuck on Instagram, just DM me. I've done like 2.2 million last month in revenue or in sales in Instagram DMs,
Wow.
So it's just, wherever I'm able to connect and network, obviously Kixie is one of those great platforms where I'm able to do it at scale. And so I'd be happy to reach out, Ralph, and continue the conversation about helping you grow and scale your business.
Hey, Buck, that's awesome. Hey, maybe to wrap up with final questions, I'll combine a couple of them. We've got a question from Bill around, is there a CRM that you can recommend? And then Eleni had a question around what other tools are game changers this year. She knows a little bit about Kixie, but what else is useful, especially when it comes to integration?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think Buck and I are both biased towards HubSpot as a CRM.
100%.
I would say for 2 reasons. One, because as a paid CRM, it trounces all the others. I could get into a variety of reasons. I know I have to be a little careful because I work with Salesforce and Pipedrive and Zoho, but I'll tell you this, I'll just be candid. It is so much easier to set up than Salesforce. It's got just as much power in terms of like automations and advanced feature set. It costs a fraction of what Salesforce costs, and you don't need a Salesforce admin to implement it. It's amazing. Yeah. And customer support is great. So like, I don't know, I'm a huge fan. And I'll tell you this, you can sign up for HubSpot for free to test it out, which is like, and it's not like a 7-day trial. You can just use it.
Yeah.
Free,
but before you do that, you should reach out to me to get you into our network 100%.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about going through Buck and Cardone is like, you'll get hooked up if you do decide to buy HubSpot. Like red carpet treat you, and you'll get like a bunch of discounts. It's definitely the way to go if you are interested in looking into HubSpot.
I dropped my email in there. Yet another platform.
Cool.
I'm all over the map. I know you're supposed to have one call to action. Today it's going to be website, Instagram, and email and Kixie. We're going to throw them all out.
Like it's omni-channel.
I'm just going to like just wherever, I don't know the consumer. So wherever you're more comfortable, just join me there.
What about MySpace? You still got MySpace going there, Bob?
I do have it, ever since Justin Timberlake bought it. I haven't done much with it though. So,
and then the question about other tools, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but I'll tell you one really cool story about how like we've transformed some of our outbound with like some other tools too. And this will be like a little bit of an unpaid ad for a couple different companies, I guess. But okay, so we have the struggle that most businesses have, which is where we've got cold outbound, right, where we're going after like game-changing new vertical companies that haven't heard about Kixie, that haven't come inbound. And we've got inbound, but our inbound was essentially limited to people who've gone to the Kixie website, signed up for a trial. Now they're on a trial. My team's engaging with them. There's this whole middle ground, right, of all these people who came to the website. In fact, majority of people come to the website and don't sign up for a trial. What happens to those people? And so I'll tell you the tools that we've kind of adopted to go after those guys, to really help them get up on running on Kixie. And that it starts with, we use a platform called Snitcher, Snitcher. There's also other ones like Leadfeeder and stuff. And basically what those platforms do is they plug into your website and they give you a bunch of insight about the visitors on that website. It's a little big brotherish, but basically they tell you, like, they look at the IP address, they look at the cookies, they look at the browsing history and cache, and they tell you like, hey, so-and-so from Halliburton has visited your website twice in the last week, and they've checked out, pages around HubSpot and AI-powered local presence styling because they want to dial over the US, or something like that. So now we've got a profile, right? Now, sometimes it'll be a business, sometimes it'll be an individual. We're capturing that information off of that platform, in our case, Snitcher. What I then have happen is I have a filter running on Snitcher to look for people who meet a bunch of different criteria that let me know they're probably a good customer to approach, and they're probably not an existing customer because we have lots of those. And so that filter looks at stuff like time on the site, which I actually want under a certain amount, number of visits, web pages visited, that kind of stuff. Once we've got that filtered list of companies who I think would be a good target for what I've kind of created, and I call my like in outbound-ish team, is a team going after these deals who have like come in but not signed up for a trial. What I have them then next do is I have Zapier, which is a great automation tool that I know Buck's team uses, I use, that helps programs communicate with each other.
Yep.
It basically takes those leads right from Snitcher and pushes them into HubSpot automatically. It takes those filtered leads, moves them into HubSpot. It divvies them out to the agents I have on this outboundish team based off of information about those leads. HubSpot's great. It has like this insights platform that will pull up like company's annual revenue, what technology stack they have, where they're located, where they do business, and number of employees on LinkedIn, all that stuff. So they get then assigned to like junior, senior, SDR people on this outboundish team, depending on information about the company. Once it's there, they enrolled in HubSpot email sequences with, I know you asked, Elena, you asked me not to mention Kixie. I'll mention it briefly. I promise it's the only time I'll mention it. It's, we do use Kixie to do the automated texting and calling and some of the outreach through that sequence. But that combination, I'm telling you, of, and then those also get piped to Slack, by the way, to let my team members know, hey, you've got a brand new lead, just came in through Snitcher. This is the information about the company. So
yeah.
I guess in order, you've got Snitcher or Leadfeeder, one of those. Obviously, a great CRM, HubSpot is what we recommend. You've got Zapier that kind of helps all these things communicate with one another. Then you've got Slack, which I think a lot of us probably use already, but I think a lot of us use just as internal communication, and we don't think of it as something that can pipe data to and from our CRM to like me as a manager, but also my team. And then lastly, like some of the HubSpot sequencing and lead rotation that's already built into it. That's, I think, a cool tool set we've used. It's been
very nerdy, David.
Super nerdy. I know I went down a total rabbit hole. You want bring it up for me, Buck. Bring it up to a higher level for me, because
at the end of the day, David, at the end of the day, what everybody needs to do is focus on what is that relationship that you want to build. These are all amazing tools that David is mentioning, but what is our goal at the end of the day? That's it. That's our goal at the end of the day. Make that transaction happen. The only way we can do that is building trust and relationships. And I'm just super honored that David wants to build that relationship with us and that we've got such a great relationship with Kixie. And because of that, I know that I don't even have to worry about it. I know that other fruitful relationships will happen because of it. So I'm honored to be here today. And I really do appreciate the invite. And I'd love to do it again sometime whenever you guys have me back.
Absolutely.
Buck.
Thanks, Buck.
Yeah, Buck, thank you. On behalf of Kixie and all of our attendees, Buck, I want to thank you for your time and your great insights. David, thank you for joining and sharing and geeking out with us. And we'll do this again. This is fun. Really appreciate it. We'll do more webinars from Kixie. So if you guys want to check those out, we'll be sure to reach out to you guys. Be sure to check out Cardone Ventures at cardoneventures.com. Buck has shared that information. And if you want to learn more about Kixie, of course, Kixie.com, better sales made simple. Really excited to be working with you guys if you're interested. With that, I'm Matt Longe on behalf of Kixie. I want to thank Buck and David and all of you for joining. Take care, be safe out there, and happy selling.
Bye, guys.
Bye.